So let's talk a little bit about stress here. There's really good research on mindfulness, and mindfulness is really a matter of sort of being mindful of the present moment, noticing what's coming in and out of your mind, but not reacting to it. So meditation can kind of train your mind to note what's passing in and out of your consciousness, but not pushing it out, not dwelling on it. It's just letting it kind of go in and out of your consciousness, and often refocusing on your breathing, using our respirations to kind of channel our mind to a kind of inner focus. And what meditation and mindfulness can do is allow you to have emotional experiences and not be so swept away and taken by your emotional experiences, and thereby remaining more calm and a little bit more rational and thoughtful about your experience. So there's good research on this. And one thing perhaps is I like to show my students a handy model of the brain. So if this is your brain, this would be the brain stem. This is your limbic system, and your memory and your emotions are together here. This is why you need to make it emotional when you're trying to remember something, because these brain regions are really close together, and you're more likely to remember those things that are emotional. And the cortex folds over this. Now, I'm doing this, and I'm also kind of inviting you to just make this fist feeling, because the cortex, especially the prefrontal cortex, touches the limbic system or these memory structures, as well as the emotions, and it kind of modulates those emotional pieces of the brain. So it can touch that. The prefrontal cortex represents the heights of our capacities to think in terms of morality, intuition, insight, empathy, compassion. So many things are able to activate this, like gratitude and compassion meditations and so forth. And by so doing, you can activate this region and then have a little bit more control over this emotional center of the brain. It also touches the back of the brain. So the prefrontal cortex touches your brainstem and your respiration, your breathing. And so when you're meditating, when you're engaged in mindfulness, expressing gratitude, and some of these very beneficial activities, you can actually change your heart rate, your blood pressure, and some of these areas of the brain that are in the back of the brain by the brainstem there. So that's why it's nice to kind of make a fist and feel how all those regions are connected. Finally, I'd like to talk about a few studies that I think are fascinating, and they convey some principles about stress that should be relevant to you throughout this course. Danner et al. Did a study on American Catholic nuns looking at their spiritual autobiographies when they were in their 20s. And if those nuns had optimism and hope and love, they lived happier, more fulfilling lives. But what perhaps is most interesting, I would think, is that these nuns, and this was a longitudinal study across their lives, so they were able to see that these nuns lived longer. I find that to be very interesting and very fascinating. And it conveys the importance of social support, finding meaning and optimism on things like our health. So, this next slide is kind of surprising, because which of these four factors has the strongest association with poor health? So, is it smoking, being obese, or being inactive, or lacking strong social connections? And prior to this class, prior to this lecture, hearing me talk a little bit about social connections, um, you might be inclined to say number one or two or three, but they're really all roughly the same contributions. And I could show you the research that supports this. It's a meta-analysis, a study of all the studies, but these have very, very similar effects on our health in terms of overall health outcomes. And my point in bringing this up is that our social relationships with our families and the people around us who are able to help us go through the challenges we face, to listen to us, to help soothe our sympathetic nervous systems, because when we are stressed, our heart kicks up and the energy starts to go to our muscles, and our flight or flight response kicks in, and that energy is not devoted to our immune systems. So there's a micro war going on between the bacteria, microphagia, lymphocytes, killer cells, trying to get rid of bacteria all over our bodies. Um, does not have the energy it needs to win that war if you're stressed sometimes. So Cohen et al. Did a really neat study where they dropped cold viruses in people's noses. Those who were high stress, those who were in the report high stress, were much more likely to get the cold virus in their nose. Those who were, there was about 50% of the time for those in the high stress group. Those in the low stress group, it was about a quarter of the time. So about twice as much if you're in a higher stress condition in terms of your likelihood of getting sick. I think this is really interesting. Well, by the way, I mean, how much would you have to get paid to participate in this study? I mean, to get cold viruses dropped in your nose, they paid them. It was at least 700. I think it was $800. And if that's the case, sign me up too. I guess so. Because you're not going to get the cold every time. But I have a cold right now, so I can relate. But those are a few things I want to share with you as we start this semester in terms of stress, in terms of memory, and in terms of time management.